How's it going, everyone? So, Digital Foundry is now apparently, it's not official, but from what they can tell by, I guess because developer kits are going out, that this seems to be the specs of what the Switch 2 is, and we're going to take a look into this. So, the best thing to do here is to take a look at what are we getting from a mobile tablet hybrid device of the Switch 1 compared to the Switch 2. What is the jump there? What are we getting in the jump here? That's the way I'm looking at it. I'm not comparing this to Xbox or PlayStation. Those are stationary consoles that are designed to be around a TV. They're not hybrid. So, yeah, we got to look at it from Switch to Switch 1. Are we ready to see what this is about? All right, let's go.
Nintendo has released its own technical specifications for the Switch 2 console hybrid, but it's fair to say that the detail is somewhat selective. And by and large, that's absolutely fine, right? It's been a long time since the firm effectively ducked out of the technological arms race against Sony and Microsoft, and on-paper comparisons hold little weight for a company that concentrates on its own types of experiences. Nevertheless, a more detailed look at actual specs does give us a good idea of system capabilities and also allows us to get some perspective on the strengths and weaknesses of the hardware that developers will need to get to grips with and work with for the next 6, 7, maybe even 8 years.
Right. And for me, it's more about like, what are you going to be doing with these specs first party? Nintendo, to me, are the best developers in the industry. They've already proven that. So I want to know what you're going to be doing with these specs for first party. This is why I care about it. I'm not interested in a Switch 2 for third party, though I can understand why certain people might be, because it's now going to be more third party open than ever. Because we know Nintendo's always made it hell for third party developers. That's one thing I'll admit that company is just ridiculous with. But since we have this coming our way, the only reason I'm interested and you see me do comparisons for third party is because it gives you the idea of what are we getting from a jump compared to what we had with Switch 1. That to me is the intelligent way of looking at it. I'm not looking at comparing a Switch to a console. I just think that that's stupid because and even then, they're not consoles. They're just mid AMD PCs. But you guys kind of get what I'm saying here. So, third party games shown, let me know what the first party would be capable of. Mario Kart looks wonderful. I have no problem with it. And to me, video games are about fun and am I having a good time and do I enjoy it? It's not about graphics.
Now, obviously, there have been plenty of leaks surrounding Switch 2 in the past. In fact, we did a video on those leaks over a year ago, and while we were pretty convinced about their legitimacy, asterisks and caveats were attached. We just didn't know for sure. There was that proverbial grain of salt. That changes today, as we've now got rock-solid confirmation on the Nintendo Switch 2 specifications. A lot of what we're going to be talking about focuses on perhaps the vaguest element of the official spec, described as a custom NVIDIA processor. Now, back in the day, Nintendo described the original Switch's processor as a custom NVIDIA Tegra processor, when in reality, it was essentially a vanilla Tegra X1. However, the new chip, described in shipping manifests and NVIDIA leaks as T239, is very much custom silicon designed specifically for Nintendo and for mobile gaming. Here's what it looks like, and yeah, at this point...
Yeah, it's exactly what I thought.
What we are looking at is confirmation of pre-existing leaks, but with some additional detail.
Ampere.
Starting with the CPU, NVIDIA and Nintendo have indeed settled on the ARM Cortex-A78C.
So we've heard about the ARM's CPUs coming around the corner. Interesting. This is going to be interesting when it comes to also dealing with different types of decrypting and all that people shouldn't be doing. It'll make it a little bit more annoying because they're using this technology. That's very interesting. So at least we got 8 cores here now. The Switch 1 only had 4. Oh my god, it was bad. So yeah, they've jumped to the 8-core section, thank god. And they're using a 64-bit over a 32-bit, cryptography extensions enabled. Okay, not bad. So this is better than the PlayStation 4 CPU though, and the Xbox One CPU, easily. So, but it's not better than the Series S CPU. But still, this is not bad for what Nintendo is doing, considering, and I know, like I said, we're not comparing them directly, but you guys probably want a good analysis somewhat. So this is very good, considering that you're going to be able to be in handheld mode with something like this. This is where we're seeing the biggest upgrade. For people that only stay in the handheld mode because they've always had a handheld community and there's people that like that, yeah, that's impressive. That's cool for that. Knowing you can have 120 frames per second screen too with VRR, that's amazing. And the screen being almost 8 inches, damn, you know. So
running the ARM v8 64-bit instruction set with cryptography extensions enabled. 32-bit not supported by the SDK, by the way.
yeah,
Looking at the official specifications shared by ARM, there are various cache configurations available, but the Switch 2 iteration of the A78C has 64K of L1 instruction cache and another 64K of L1 data cache. Moving on to L2, each of the 8 cores.
these are memory caches, by the way, that the processor uses. Um, yeah, like I said, that's not too bad. That's pretty solid and good for handheld. For docked, I wouldn't say that's impressive for a console when they go docked, but this is still a huge jump compared to what the Switch One had. So yeah, they're definitely going to be getting third-party support because of this, 100%, and they have to use DLSS.
Has 256K of cache, while all 8 cores can share 4 megabytes of L3 cache.
Yeah.
So the original Switch's Tegra X1 featured ARM Cortex A57 cores, 4 of them, with 1 reserved for the operating system.
That means developers had 3 cores to work with at that low speed. Oh my God, no wonder.
Leaving 3 free for developers. There's a similar ratio in Switch 2.
How did Monolith Soft get Xenoblade Chronicles 3 to do that? That's insane. And the way they got Tears of the Kingdom, dude, they are just technical wizards. This is not, no, bro. This is God tier and beyond human shit, bro. The way that they're managing to get those games running on that. This is what I mean by like their development skills are insane. They do so much with lesser specs. This is why I'm excited for their first party. You know what I mean? So yeah, but obviously if we can run this on PC, that would just be way better. But no, that's not gonna happen with Nintendo. So yeah, can't miss out on those games. Got to get the hardware.
6 of the 8 cores are available to developers for games, with 2 reserved by Nintendo for running the operating system.
So what are they going to have on the operating system to take an extra core compared to the Switch One instead of giving devs 7 cores? Very interesting. This is still double the amount of cores that the Switch One has. By the way, this is on the consoles. This happens all the time. They usually always do that for operating systems, but I guess for game chat and other things they plan on having. I was reading too that the Switch 2 might have themes, by the way.
CPU clocks are confirmed, but still a bit of a mystery in some sense. In mobile mode, the CPU runs at 1100 MHz, but this drops down to 998 MHz when docked.
This can still give them more performance when docked because of what else they're using, but what a developer can do is use this for docked if they want to. They're allowed to do that. They did that for the Switch One, by the way.
I still don't have an explanation for this, but memory bandwidth drops in mobile mode, which would likely have an impact on CPU performance. That could possibly be offset by a slightly higher clock. Just a theory on my part. Interestingly, Nintendo does specify that the maximum clock for the CPU is 1.7 GHz, a lot higher than the other specified figures.
Yeah, 1.7 is actually not too bad. That's what they're putting it to. By the way, they can actually extend that to go to 18 or 1900 if they want for developers to use in the future. And developers using this, if they want, they can tap into this and use this to make this better. So actually, this gives me more hope because this is early access. I think down the line, they possibly could do that because they were able to tap into extra stuff for the Switch 1 too. So this is good. Knowing that we have this much more megahertz for CPU because they're going to need this. This is going to be the bottleneck for third party for Nintendo.
Again, speculation here, but this could be a theoretical maximum that Nintendo could open up at some point in the future. Back in the day, Nintendo improved loading times on Switch 1.
But the good thing about the Switch's CPU is it has very high cache for L1, L2, L3. Whereas, like, you don't think about comparing that to the consoles because it's different, because their caches work differently. So, yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how they utilize that.
Games by downclocking the GPU on loading screens and using the thermal headroom to ramp up the CPU to 1.785 GHz. Faster CPU, faster decompression of assets. Still, this is an established spec point, even though the 1100 MHz and 998 MHz core clocks are indeed confirmed for developers. Let's talk about the graphics hardware, and again, what we're effectively looking at is confirmation of existing spec leaks. Switch 1 used the NVIDIA Maxwell architecture from the GTX 900 series with 256 CUDA cores. Switch 2 uses Ampere, as seen in the RTX 30 series for its
The only reason I think this is good because you had a lot of people doing wrong tests saying that they were going to be using a downclocked RTX 2050. Now we realize because it's Ampere, the Nintendo Switch 2 is actually using a downclocked RTX 3050. So obviously they're not using the full capabilities of it. You would just destroy the battery in the console in the way they designed it. Could they actually make that card run a lot better? Yeah, I mean, when you really think about the 3050, that card is capable of outperforming and doing better. If they had that with the rest of the specs they have with DLSS, they're going to outperform the Series S, but that's not the way they're doing this. They're downclocking it a lot, like nerfing it and using it that way. And it's not like, to try to make it like a console war in a sense, but it's just giving you an idea of what it's actually capable of. So you'll see a lot of Series S comparisons with the Switch. And then there's people that were doing PS4 and Pro comparisons. But as a matter of fact, no, it's more powerful than the PS5 Pro, than the PS4 easily. And this is going to be explained coming up.
GPU architecture. Similar to the Switch 1 GPU, think of it as a miniaturized version of a consumer GPU. Yeah. 1,536 CUDA cores are confirmed, as are the clock speeds. 561 MHz when running in handheld mode, 1,007 MHz when docked.
So there we go again. We've got 36 CUDA cores. That's way more than the Switch 1. And you can get 1,000 MHz actually docked. So the GPU power is literally doubled when you're docked damn near. And here we go again. If Nintendo wants developers to have it, you can now go all the way up to 1,400 megahertz. But right now they have it set on this for balancing. But they can do this. Could they increase this cap even more? It's possible, but right now they want it here because it's fine, because this is mostly about their first party. But developers can tap in and use more if they needed to. And they can raise that up a little bit and raise that up, just to get to where it needs to be, to where, you never know if you need that or not.
Again, though, there is a maximum stated clock of 1.4 gigahertz on the GPU, and seemingly, according to documentation, developers can adjust the clock rate. But again, it's unclear if running at higher than the standard handheld/docked clocks is actually possible. I mean, if we think back to what happened on Switch 1, initially the GPU in handheld mode was clocked at 307 megahertz, but this kind of changed over time as Nintendo adapted to developer needs. Moving on, it's worth pointing out that developers don't get full GPU resources though. Some of it is being reserved by the system. Make no mistake though, this is a full Ampere GPU rated for 3.072 teraflops when running in docked mode according to Nintendo.
So it was true, it's over 3,000 teraflops. All right. Now, we need to be careful with the flopflation, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and make this clear to people. Now, PlayStation 4, now think about this. This is where I was trying to tell people that it's more powerful than the PS4. PS4 teraflops. Just remember, it has 1.84 teraflops. All right? The Pro had 4.2. But the CPU in the Switch is better than the Pro, and so is the RAM. The Switch 2 actually has 12 gigabytes of RAM. The Series S only has 10, and they have to use 2 for the system. So 8 is only available, or whatever. So we see this right here, right? And they have 36 Qs at 911 megahertz, 4.2 teraflops. This would be like if you were looking at like, certain things. So we get the idea here. We go over here, they have 1,007 megahertz, 1536 CUDA cores. And in handheld mode, we see it almost matches the teraflops of the PS4, and docked, it almost doubles it. So it's not more powerful than the Series S, but it's definitely more powerful than the PS4, you know what I mean, and the Xbox One easily. So this gives us the idea what it's capable of. We've seen how good games can look. Look at what Sony was able to do with the PS4 at 1.84. Look at Last of Us. Look at Days Gone. Did you see how good those games looked? So this gives you an idea what they're going to be capable of doing. This is why it's not so bad. It just depends on if you're a graphics or not. And I'm telling you, that's not what matters.
So by extension, that should drop to 1.71 teraflops when running in mobile mode. Not going to be doing any comparisons against other handheld devices here. Certainly not when it comes to comparing teraflops. In terms of GPU performance, it's going to be down to the games to do the talking at this point, in a world where memory bandwidth is hugely important and where the concept of quote-unquote...
So for example, let's just say like Steam Deck. What is Steam Deck's teraflops? Steam Deck teraflops. What do they have? 1.6 teraflops GPU. I don't understand why you have some dumbass saying that the Steam Deck is more powerful. It's like, what are you talking about? No, it's not. When the Switch 2 is docked, it's way more powerful than the Steam Deck. I don't have to say more powerful, but it's clearly more powerful docked. You don't get a benefit docked on the Steam Deck. It doesn't make it more powerful.
Flopflation, as Mark Cerny puts it, makes comparisons kind of meaningless. Moving on, obviously DLSS has been confirmed by Nintendo and Nvidia, as has Ampere's ray tracing features. Switch 2 is rated for around 10 gigaраys per second, doubling up to 20 gigaраys per second when docked. Of course, ray tracing is taxing on a resource-constrained system like the Switch 2, so it's no surprise that we've not actually seen any RT effects in...
Maybe like Nintendo doing it for like their cartoon graphics and stuff like that. I can see that being beneficial. But please, for the love of God, not for no third party, not for those specs, no. But it just gives you the idea that they have that technology, and they also have tensor cores, which helps with AI integration, so that's going to be nice.
In any games showcased to date. But surely it's just a matter of time. In some of our simulated tests using a downclocked RTX 20...
See, look how good Control looked. They're using a downclocked 2050 with only 4 gigabytes of RAM, 750 megahertz, and they're doing low-medium ray tracing at 1080p DLSS balance, and it's running at 30 frames. So you see how good this game looks just even with the 2050? The Switch GPUs at 3050, it tells you what it's capable of. These developers have just been lazy, I'm telling you. GTA has proven that with the PlayStation 5 version, blowing away everything else.
2050, we were able to engage ray tracing. And in some scenarios, it can indeed be game-changing.
So it's enough.
Memory next.
They're just
and
wise.
Again, for those keeping up with the leaks, there's no new information here on the hardware side at least. Switch 2 uses 12 gigabytes of LPDDR5X on the motherboard leaks seen so far. This is delivered via two 6 gigabyte modules. Memory bandwidth is confirmed as 102 gigabytes per second when docked.
So we see here the Switch has 12 gigabytes of RAM. The leaks were actually right, and it's two 6 gigabyte modules, not one soldered. 128-bit memory interface, 3200 megahertz docked. I mean, that's not bad, honestly. So yeah, 12 gigabytes.
Against 68 gigabytes per second when running in handheld mode. The speed of those modules is downclocked, presumably to decrease power draw and increase battery life. Nothing new here, but what we can now confirm is that of the 12 gigabytes of available memory, 3 gigabytes of that is reserved by the system itself, leaving 9 gigs available for developers. Compared against Switch 1, the older console shipped with just 4 gigabytes of memory in total, with 3.2 gigs available to developers. So Nintendo is certainly reserving a much bigger chunk, proportionately, of total RAM for non-gaming functions in this generation. Next up, let's talk about a piece of hardware that, as far as I know, is fully custom-made for Nintendo. The FDE, or File Decompression Engine. Switch 2 features substantially upgraded storage versus the original, 256 gigabytes of UFS storage, which users can augment with microSD express cards up to 2 terabytes in size. But faster storage is just one element in reducing loading times. Data is typically compressed on storage, so not only does it need to be loaded into system memory, it needs to be decompressed, historically a job for the CPU. Switch 2 can defer that decompression task to the FDE instead of the CPU, which should be a lot faster and more power efficient.
Oh,
the
that's
File
good.
Decompression Engine is a hardware-accelerated solution for unpacking LZ4 compressed files, and all of this is a part of dealing with files within the NSP packages in which games, DLC, and the like are stored.
This is what makes Nintendo smart. This is why their games don't take up much storage. Like the biggest game of all time is literally Tears of the Kingdom and Mario Kart, and they're both under 25 gigabytes or something. Their decompression systems are genius.
Next up, let's move on to the screen. Not much to add here to Nintendo's specification. It's a 7.9-inch wide color gamut LCD screen with a 1080p resolution and support for HDR10 and VRR up to 120 Hz. An additional detail that hasn't been disclosed is that it's a 10-point multi-touch capacitive touch
Now you guys are going to have a portable PlayStation 4 machine capable basically in handheld mode. That's pretty impressive for the handheld world. Maybe not looking at it as a console, but like I said, it's not a full console, so it's hard to compare something that's specifically designed to only be a power station on a machine fixed rather than something that can be portable and moved. So you can't compare them spec for spec in that sense. It's more complicated than that.
Screen. And for the record, Switch 1's display was also a 10-point
That's why I was saying the best comparison is between Switch 1 and Switch 2 jump.
multi-touch variant too. Something that is important to clarify is that as far as Switch 2 developers are concerned, VRR, right now at least, is indeed a function of the internal display only, and that there is no support at all right now for VRR over HDMI, for the docked experience. The best theory we have.
Oh, so they designed that around the handheld internal aspect. I get what he's saying. So they're going to have to add like some software or something, kind of like the way Sony did it for docked, which I think they should do. That would be nice.
Have for this is that the dock's display port to HDMI connector doesn't support standard HDMI VRR. But whatever is the cause, we really hope to see Nintendo provide some sort of solution in due course. And that's the extent of what we know about Switch 2 right now in terms of its hardware specifications.
It's pretty solid for a handheld.
What Nintendo has revealed. But just one minor point of clarification. Throughout this video, we've talked about portable and docked configurations. By and large, in terms of how these modes are applied, that is accurate. However, the docked mode is more accurately described as a performance mode. And in reality, there's nothing stopping developers using the undocked specifications in docked mode. It was the same situation on Switch 1 actually, but in the vast majority of scenarios, developers
But that's kind of like what I was thinking. Yeah, like I said, if they want to tap into more, they can, because that's undocked.
moved to the performance mode for docked play. By and large, the leaks going all the way back to 2021 have proven accurate, which gives you some idea of just how long it takes to get a console to market. But with development kits now in developer hands and some visibility on the games that have been revealed so far, we can get a much better measure of what the system is capable of. But with that being said, particularly when looking at third-party titles, remember, this is just the beginning, and like Switch 1 before it, the quality of those games from a technical perspective will inevitably rise significantly across the generation.
Yeah.
In terms of things to look out for, well, game chat is clearly an important part of the Switch 2 package, but
I'm not really interested in that. So now we have an idea here. Let me know what y'all think. This is an interesting one, kind of a little bit long, but this is something you want to look at because now you have your finalized answer. Could the specs be updated after from Nintendo? Yeah, it's possible because this didn't officially come from them, but I'm thinking this is from a game developer kit that Digital Foundry got, and they're not going to leak the sourced info. So yeah, let me know what you guys think about this. I'm satisfied with this because I know what these devs are capable of doing. So for me, it's more about first party. Obviously, I still wanted better specs, but that's all right though. Let's see how the development goes. All right, y'all. Peace out. Have a great day.